Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our channel, Our Scientology Stories, Peeling the Onion. And we are here back again with another special story for you. And before we get started, I'm going to introduce my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. Hi, Janis. How you doing?
Hello, Mark.
Hello,
Good day,
everybody.
everyone. Doing good. It looks like the dogs have finally settled down, so I'm in for a nice, easy show with the dogs resting.
Okay, that's great. So why don't you tell everybody what's our show today, and then we'll introduce our special guest.
Okay, today we are doing part 2 of the Liability cruise. Just to reorient you, that was where the ship got assigned liability because we dragged anchor and we hit the some rocks and we bent the propeller, and we had an untrained crew. So during our training process, we went lifeboat rowing to do little missions and got caught in a storm and pushed ashore onto the beach of Spain with no money and passports. So we left off where the locals had given us some food, and I'm sitting on the beach with Joan Robinson, and we have local police around us. And so now we're going to go into part 2 with Neville Chamberlin, who is there with me.
Hello there.
Hello, Neville. How are you today?
Oh, fairly good, thank you. Fairly good. You're looking bright.
So are you.
That's the light.
Yeah, we can see you really well.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. Are we ready to go again?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to reorient everybody here. This was the Royal Scotman there. This is, she's at in port somewhere there. And then,
I believe that's Valencia.
I did this as a close-up of Mary Sue, and that's Phoebe Maurer from the earlier slideshow because it make it easier to see them up close. And then here we are. There's Janis on the beach with Joan Robertson. So go ahead, Janis, and we can pick up the story there with Neville.
So this is March 1968. So I am 11 years old there. All right. So here we are on the beach. Let's go to the next slide. And here's just a bunch of the crew sitting around, and then you can see some locals off to the right there looking at us strange aliens that have washed ashore.
Invaded from the ocean.
Yeah.
It was interesting because they didn't know what to make of us.
Which is was it pretty wild? I guess it didn't happen very often that boats would come ashore in those days.
Well, the other thing was, of course, that Bill Robertson was on the flashlight semaphore, instructing us to return to the ship. And of course, people on the shore saying, "What's the signals he was sending to us?" We couldn't understand what he was on about either, you know.
And what was Spain like then? This is what you said, 1960, whatever.
68. It was under the dictatorship of Franco.
Yeah, so, he was the king or whatever, Francisco Franco. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was.
You had to mind your P's and Q's, you know.
Yeah, it wasn't an open society like it is now.
Be as rumbustious as people are nowadays. They would have dealt with you quite severely. And in fact, they used to do things like you're in a bar, they come up to you and say, "Oh, what do you think of Franco?" And they want you to make some negative comments so they could arrest you. It used to happen to bars around the Puerta de la Luz and say, "Franco, good man, like him, strong man." Then they walk away. That's the sort of attitude things we used to run into.
Yeah. Okay. Now, this here is after the next lifeboat showed up. The police already arrived after the first lifeboat showed up, which I was on, and then the second one. Then Neville, I believe you were on the third boat.
Yep. And after the first two had gone away, there weren't many in our boat actually. A lot of them had gone with the other boats to make up the rowing numbers. So we were light on the numbers, so we got a tow back. And But basically, they threw out the front painter to the boat, the tug there, and I just held onto it, and we got towed back to the ship that way.
Yeah, that was later on. We're still arriving in these photos.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
And these are the police here, right?
Yeah.
In the uniforms?
Yes. And this is just one of the crew members passed out on the beach because we had nothing else to do but just laze around.
Was it tiring because you were trying to row against the current? Like we're everybody pretty beat? Is that what happened?
They were. I was lucky. Being 11 years old, I didn't have an oar, so I didn't have to row. I just got to sit there and watch all the adults. What about you, Neville?
Also, the stress of it all is quite tiring as well, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a lot of them flaked out. On the left, there is my dad. There.
There's a close-up of him.
Yep. And behind him is Fred Hare. Some people would know him as later on being he was Mary Sue's deputy for Snow White. And that was all part of the whole FBI raid in 1977. So that's a whole nother discussion later on.
Okay.
And that's two of the police with our one of our lifeboats. Baron Perez and Art Webb. And on the far right is James Byrne.
Okay.
Yes.
Otto Roos going for a swim.
Yeah, I was going to say, who is that going swimming?
That's Otto.
Yeah.
He just peeled off his clothes and went in the ocean.
You know, I think Otto always wore a bathing suit underneath because he was always in his bathing suit somewhere.
Yeah.
What time of year was it? Was it cold?
Yeah, it was March.
Okay, so the water had to have been pretty cold.
Yeah, well, he's Dutch. He's used to cold water.
Who's that?
So, yeah, now the Commandante had finally arrived, so they're trying to figure out what to do with us.
Who's that in the very front? Is that one? Who are there any? The one with the white cap is a Sea Org member, or what?
No, the one in the white cap in the middle, looking this way, is the Commandante.
Oh, okay.
So having nothing to do, we decided to play leapfrog. So that's me in the front there, and behind me in the blue shirt is my sister, and then at the back there is Sue Pomeroy.
Well, you're having to leap pretty high.
Yeah. The
one at the back is not me.
No, that's Sue Pomeroy. And
I'm
you
just
see
looking
those...
at.
What?
I was just going to say, I'm just looking. The people leaning down are barely leaning down, so you're really having to leap over.
Yeah, but I was young, 11 years old, and Terry's 13.
Yeah.
So, no,
Okay,
she's
then I got
actually
the next
12
one
in
here.
that picture. But those, go back. Can you go? Yeah. See those stairs in the back going up the side of the hill?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the stairs. Claire and I went up those stairs to go exploring, and that's where we were met at the top with a armed guard pointing his gun at us, and he marched us then all the way back down the road and back to the beach. And just more leapfrog on the beach. I wonder sometimes, what did the locals think of us?
I was just thinking the same thing. I was thinking, who are these crazy people invading our beach that are now leaping over each other?
Yeah, exactly. And this is the day where the women, they wore dresses. They didn't wear pants. They didn't do sports. They were like, they looked after the children and cleaned the house and cooked. And here we are, with all the men doing the same thing, rowing and pulling in the lifeboats, and leapfrogging.
And where in Spain again was this?
South of Benidorm.
Okay.
On the southern part of the coast, going towards Gibraltar way, but it was south of Benidorm.
Okay.
So there's James Byrne doing a PR handling with the Commandante.
Oh, that's the commandant smiling?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did he speak English better than the other
No.
police? No. So what's James saying to him?
I don't know. But Neville, do you know what James might have been saying in Afrikaans?
I wouldn't even hazard a guess, but good manners and breeding prevent me from making any further comment.
Okay.
Because you got to, at this time, James had a heavy South African accent.
Uh-huh.
With his English speaking.
Yeah.
So there we are, mustered up.
Is that James Byrne with his back to us?
Yes. And then on the left in the boiler suit, that's Otto. And I think the guy in the middle, is that Sam Spivak?
Who?
Sam Spivak.
No, Sam, I don't think Sam was in that one there.
Okay.
I'll tell you about
right,
Sam later
Bill
on.
Deutsch.
The red shirts, Bill Deutsch. Is that what you said, Janis?
Yeah, I think it is Bill.
Okay. What are you all doing there? Are they just getting briefed in terms of what's going on?
Yes. And see,
milling
here's
around
the
the
other.
beach.
This is a different angle of that same muster. And now everyone's just running. That's Delwyn getting some water. The locals brought us some jugs of water. And there's Neville drinking his.
Our special guest drinking his water.
Yes, there was no cups. It was just the old-fashioned way of aiming to your mouth,
Yeah.
Yeah, and well before plastic bottles.
Yes.
Yes. And we all had to drink from the same thing and pass it around.
Yeah, but Neville's practicing proper hygiene. He's not putting his lips to it. He's just pouring it into his mouth.
Exactly. And that's what we all did. That's just some of the crew. That's Art Webb on the left and James Byrne on the right.
Who's in the center? Do you know?
No.
Okay.
And then it's becoming evening now. We've been there all day with just some crackers and some barley sugar and the water that the locals brought us. And this is, Neville is on the right, talking to someone over by the lifeboats when we're just trying to figure out what to do. Well, and we're waiting actually for them to tell us what we're going to do. Because by this point, it looks nice there, but the ship, Neville, hadn't the ship sailed away by this point?
It had, yes.
No.
And it had to leave the area, you see, and come back that next day.
There's a ship there.
Right. But that's the next day. But
okay.
But while we were there, the ship pulls up anchor and leaves, and we're kind of, oh, where's it going? We couldn't even see it. And then what happens is we're being told that there's a bus that's coming to get us and take us to a fishing boat. Well, what happens instead is these trucks arrive, open back trucks arrive, and we're all under gunpoint piled into these trucks. We have no idea where they're taking us because, we just had Joan and Candy speaking broken Spanish, not knowing what's being said to them. So we're just, okay, get in the trucks and go where they're taking us. Is that right, Neville?
Yep, that was it. We just sat and waited.
Yeah, and then the trucks end up taking us over to a little fishing village where we get onto a fishing boat.
Is that the next picture? Yeah,
the next picture is, okay, there. So that's not the fishing boat, but, there's a fishing boat that took us out to the ship. Now, we're in a storm. So the fishing boat is pitching and rolling, and it's so rough out there, they tell us all to go inside. So we're down in the cabin, which smells like diesel fumes, and it's rocking and rolling. It's just terrible. And I fall asleep. I'm laying on one of there's a few bunk beds there. So I lay down on one. And when I wake up, we still haven't gotten to the ship yet. But I wake up and I was so seasick, I threw up all over Sue Pomeroy's foot. Then they finally let me go outside. And now the whole room stunk. So other people now start getting seasick. So it was not pleasant on that fishing boat as it's pitching and rolling. And anyway, it was dreadful. And we,
Okay.
not yet. Anyway, we finally get up close to the Scotsman, and James Byrne is up on the bridge trying to tell the captain to get in close because he wanted the crew members to jump from the fishing boat in through the cattle doors of the Scotsman. And the captain refused to go so close because we had a 2-foot rubbing strake around, and his boat could have gotten caught and capsized from it. Finally, the captain just ignored James, turned around, and took us back to the fishing village.
Yep.
At which point they put us in an empty restaurant for the night.
Yeah.
It was tourist season, so there was no food, no nothing. We were just, here's a place to sleep. So we all just laid on the tile floor or heads on a table and slept. And then in the morning, they piled us into buses.
Let me ask you a question before you go on, Janis. So what was the Apollo? What was the Royal Scotman, the captain and Mary Sue and all that? What were they doing, or what did you know they were doing all during this time while you guys were on the beach and then in this restaurant?
Oh, worried about us.
I mean, did you guys ever get any communication?
No, not really. The only thing we had was that flashing semaphore light, because the radios, the two-way radios didn't work.
And so the ship didn't know what was going on either because you had no way of communicating with them.
They were just telling us to get back to the ship. We're going, how,
Yeah, it's just Captain Bill flashing, messages through Morse code type of thing.
Let me ask you another question, though, Janis. Didn't you have like a motorboat or a motorized lifeboat that they could have put in and then come in at least to find out what was going on?
No,
that requires intelligence.
That's why you guys were in Liability, right?
No, it was the engineer's boat, number 8.
We had one lifeboat with a motor. All the rest were oars.
Yeah.
And I think they were probably afraid to send any more crew off because they had a skeleton crew as it was. Because skeleton crew on the bridge and in the engine room because everyone else was in the lifeboats. There was like maybe 50, 60 of us in those lifeboats. So, Neville, you want to say something?
That was the last time we did one of those missions, right? We decided we basically got ourselves back on board, all right? Mary Sue was thrilled to get us back on board. And after that, we then sailed up the coast. We used to go to 2 ports, Sagunto and Buriandi, up the north of Valencia. They were old Roman ports and always well received in there. Very small, very difficult to get the boat in there, but we used to get in there and provision. And then sail back out again, doing our drills and sailing along the restricted area of sea. That was the Spanish Navy's training ground, for which they didn't thank us.
So, Janis, tell us then what happened the next day. How did you guys here's photos of how you got back, right?
Yeah. Well, when they finally in the morning took us back by the buses, the tide was out and our lifeboats were way up on the beach. And these are heavy lifeboats. So then we had to dig and push to get the lifeboats back. But Neville's boat, I don't remember it on my boat because I think we had enough people to push my boat off. But when there was just Neville's boat left, they had a pilot boat come and tow it to get it out into the water to get them out.
And towed us back to the ship.
Oh, they towed you all the way back?
Well, yeah, because we didn't have enough people to row back, you see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I was lucky. I had the photographer on my boat, so we were the first boat back, and Baron Perez was in charge of our boat. And as soon as we got back, there's Baron. As soon as we got back aboard, he turns to Mary.
Stay with it. Who's this here?
Oh, well, Mary Sue's the one in the middle, to the left with the cap on. There's Mary Sue. And next to her is Marion Powell. I told the story before about Marion being on the ship in 1968 and then having to leave with her family. And that's John O'Keefe.
Who was he?
John O'Keefe was the seaman that was left there to help Mary Sue as captain. He was he a trained ship's captain already?
No. He was chief officer.
Was he the Scientologist or no?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, he was. And there's some of the Spanish crew that we had at the cattle doors to help get some of the people off the boats. And this is hooking my lifeboat back up.
Like, would they raise the boat? Is that how you got off the boats, or would you get off the boats in the cattle doors and then have them raise the boats?
No, they raised the boats with us in it. So, well, they did actually take some people off there, but most went up to the very top.
Is that the cattle doors there, or what is
That's the
that?
cattle doors there, yes. And they're watching the boat get hooked up to come up.
And that's Mary Sue, Captain Bill?
Yes, and Marion.
Okay, and there's the lifeboat.
In the middle to the front of the picture, you can see the top of my head with my little life vest on there. And then this is the crew getting off that first boat. And when we got back, Baron Perez turns to Mary Sue and says, "We're the first boat back. You didn't, and we got back before noon. You just didn't say which day."
Well, the woman in the front with the cigarette, she looks totally displeased.
Yeah, well, it had been a rough 24 hours.
That's what I mean. Captain Bill's smiling and everybody's smiling, but she didn't look like she's too happy. Oh.
That's Art Webb. He's still at the ship. I mean, at the flag service org in Clearwater. And then after we were done with the Liability cruise, Neville, are there more stories about that?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
About the Liability cruise?
Oh
yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, anyone coming on board the ship had to go through a staff status 1, a staff status 2, and a Sea Org staff status in order for the ship to become out of liability. Also, they had to have a security check. Now, one chap that came aboard was a guy called Jerry McDonald, who was the ex-husband of Diane McDonald. And he was ex-military and a genuine all-round villain. You know, he was a smuggler. He did all sorts of stuff. Anyway, he came on the ship, and I had to give him a security check, which was based on the Johannesburg security check, which is a range of questions. And so I asked the question, "Have you ever stolen anything?" "Oh, yes." No reaction. "Have you ever hit anyone?" "Oh, yes." "Have you ever killed anyone?" "Yes." At this stage, I realized I was getting nowhere, so I reversed the questions. "Have you ever failed to steal something?" Boy, was there some charge there, you know? "Was the time you failed to kill somebody?" "Yeah, I remember." And it was amazing what came out. So that was the first and only time I ever had to reverse a security check, just to break through the barrier of the blaseness of it. But we became firm friends on the ship. And there are many stories I could tell you, the things that we got up to that happened on the ship there. But to carry on with the sailing part, we used to have to do drills, like docking drills, damage control drills. Now, docking drill, we couldn't go into a port and do it. We had a long polystyrene rope, which we used to lay in the water about 2 miles off the coast, then sail the ship around in a big loop, and then come back in and dock the ship alongside this rope. That's how we got quite adept at docking. Now, the problem was, you see, when we were doing this, a unique thing about the ship was that she had reverse running lights, so that day or night, if you're going at night and you're reversing, you've got to have lights on to show you're heading that direction. Now, we were going up and down the coast, you see, and I remember we were about 2 miles off the shore, and this large cargo ship was coming up behind us. And getting closer and closer. We sounded the horn, nothing. Mary said, "What should we do?" I said, "Hang on." So I went up to the front, up the bridge, and I threw the running lights. So all of a sudden, that ship in the dark is now looking at a ship coming head on at them, 200 yards away. Well, you've never seen panic in your life. They suddenly hung hard to port, swerved out the way, and then I threw the running lights back. So we're going forward again, like as if we're going forward. They came steaming up beside us, screaming and shouting at us from the bridge with bullhorns, and we're going, "Care, nice day, hello, how are you?" And they're making gestures at us, and we're going, yes, we understand, They just carried. We just ignored them because I think that it was such a severe shift of course that some of their cargo had shifted as well. It was that dramatic a change. Wow. So they cleared off, or they just sailed on past us. But that's the sort of thing we would have to do.
Neville,
the restricted area, we were actually anchored off between the restricted area and the shore one night. And I was standing on the starboard deck looking out, and Mary Sue came by, and I was with a couple of other people. And so we'll have some fun here. So I got some binoculars out, and we're looking at binoculars at the sea. Mary Sue, being a naturally cautious person, said, "What are you doing?" He said, "We're watching the submarine races." What? The submarine racing? You can't see any submarine racing, but it's down below, 35 meters down. Well, how do you know they're racing? Oh, you look for the telltale bubbles on the top. And she, really? And of course, someone in America said, they chipped it. "Oh yeah, we have the same thing in San Diego. They have submarine, very popular over there, testing the crews, It's going, "Really? Submarine racing?" So you got my binoculars. She's looking out there. And she's saying, "Look, can you see this rubber?" "Oh yeah, I see what you mean, So we had her convinced, right? So we went. Anyway, she went out to Bill Robertson and said, Bob said, "What have you been doing, Mary?" He said, "I've been watching the submarine racing." Bill was a little stuck in the mud. He said, "Submarine racing? Are you crazy?" And she said the penny dropped, Well, Mary Sue had a very determined stride to her walk, all right? And she came looking for me.
And to give you a piece of her mind.
To impart her point of view,
Right. Now, you got to remember, too, all of our charts to navigate off of were out of date.
Oh, of course.
They were like from the 50s or something like that.
Napoleonic.
Yes.
Hey, Neville, let me ask you, during that time, during the Liability cruise days, what was your position on, did you have a ship position where,
I was condition 1 helm. I was a helmsman.
Okay, so you were actually steering the ship.
Yes. Well, I'd experience on it because I'd done the previous steering in and out of Valencia Harbor.
What was that like, steering a ship like that for the first time?
Hairy. It's you don't realize that it's not like a car, right? Turn starboard, nothing happens, then there's a long lag, and finally about 15 seconds later you start to get some movement. So you have to predict things,
Yeah.
And it can get quite out of hand if you don't predict and project it.
Yeah, it doesn't turn on a dime like a car.
It's good fun.
Yeah. And it wouldn't turn on a dime like a car would. So like you said, you had to predict what you were doing.
Yeah. But we got quite good in the end. And at the end, I mean, one of the more hilarious moments was that on the bridge, the horn wouldn't work properly. So we said, Jerry McDonald up the mast to adjust the bolts and nuts on the horn. Anyway, as he was doing it, Cal Wigney was standing there, a bit of a toad, and we thought that's some fun here. So I said to him, "You see that cord there? When Jerry up the top undoes the bolts, give a pull on the horn, will you? Just to test it works." So I'm out the way. I'm out of view, you see, and Otto's standing there. Sorry, Carl is standing there, and he sees Jerry just dismantling the nuts, getting ready, pulls the horn, and suddenly a spume of filthy black water comes shoot out of the horn, all over Jerry, and then this loud blast, right in his face. Yeah. And he looks around and he sees Carl hanging on the wire to get the horn going, right? And it was like he's now dripping with filthy oil water, deaf in his ear, and he's coming down the mast. Carl, at that point, he suddenly realized that survival is the name of the game. So he just
particularly isn't Jerry the guy who killed somebody before?
Yes.
He knew it. And he drops everything and flees down the deck and hides down the aft somewhere, out of the way. But we used to have fun that way. It was like there was the aft cabin, the forward cabins on the A deck and the B deck were out of bounds. However, I had a pass key, so I could go there for a sojourn in the afternoon with a companion and take some time off. So I was in there, you see, replete. And all of a sudden, Mary Sue announced condition 1. Now hear this, all hands docking station. It's a drill, all right? So I've now got to get dressed, out the door, burst out the door quietly, and make my way. As I come out the door, about 5 other doors open. I'm going, what the name of heck's happening here, you see? Now, I thought I was the only one with the key. But the other people had got one of the engineers to cut them blank pass keys. So they all had pass keys to the cabins as well. So we're all standing here looking at each other like, you shouldn't be here, So we just ignored the fact we saw anyone else. They made our way up the stairway, up to the A deck, along the A deck starboard side, up to the bridge. At which point, standing on the bridge with Mary Sue, looking at us there, and she had that sort of look on her face, said, "Well, what have you been doing?" Nothing, Mary Sue, nothing, And remember John Bragan?
I remember John Bragan.
Lost 2 fingers there, and John was on the control, engine room control, and someone else is on the radar scanner, and someone else on the wing of the bridge with binoculars. All had come up there from the deck, and they're all being very on post. And she was up to John Bragan's. And what are you up to, John? Oh, nothing, Mary Sue. Because that's the guy on the bridge with the binoculars. What have you been up? Nothing, Mary Sue. And they're over the radar reader. And what have you been doing? Nothing, Mary Sue. And she turns around and she says, "Well, for an awful lot of nothing going on, an awful lot of something has been going on. Would someone like to tell me?" "No, Mary Sue. I have nothing to tell, Mary Sue." "Good, because I do hope that when we get down there, we found that the forward deck, B deck forward, is still out of bounds, isn't it?" "Oh, yes, Mary Sue, very out of bounds." So that was the end of that game we had, But it was things like this that it added a certain spice to it, Yes.
I have 2 questions for you, okay? When they sounded whatever the drill or whatever, how would they do that? Did they have like an intercom system?
Over the speaker system.
Okay. And then the second question I have, did everybody call her Mary Sue, or was she Captain or Sir, or how did you guys address Mary Sue?
I used to call her Susie. Sue. Well, we were family friends, you see.
No, I understand. I just didn't know how on the ship, you know what I mean? When, how
They
we
all called us,
most,
most of them called us sir.
yeah, most people called her sir. Well, she was the captain.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, Ron Hubbard, I never ever called him sir. Ever. I called him Ron.
Now, let me bring up another story. This actually happened after the Liability cruise, but you mentioned John Bragan. Do you remember that incident on the poop deck when we were docking in Valencia?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
He put his hand down to reach a wire without realizing that wire was about to be taking the strain of the boat, and they just took his 2 fingers off.
Ooh.
Now my mother was there at the time, and she'd been a nurse, so she got him. She got his fingers back, got him to a cabin, into a sterile cabin, and dressed it up and kept him out of reach for 3 days just to keep it sterile. And that's how he lost his 2 fingers.
Yeah, there was a laundry van on the dock waiting while we were docking, and he'd lost him from a tugboat pulling on the cables.
Yep.
And he had gloves on. But yeah, I think that was probably the worst incident we had of something happening. We didn't have anyone killed or broken backs or anything like that, but that was one of the worst, was John Bragan losing 2 fingers.
I remember that when we are moving the Avon River out of Hull, one of the wires snapped, and the steel wire snapped. It immediately splays out. Now Joan Robertson was on the forecastle head, all right, and the wire snapped and shot past her face. Now, if it had touched her, it would have literally taken her face off.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was happened so fast, just like that. She hadn't really understood what had happened. So it was a salutary lesson to all of us. You got to be careful with these things,
Right.
How about Neville? Were you ever in some like really high seas? You know what I mean? Like real heavy weather out on the ship?
On the Avon River, yes. We crossed the Bay of Biscay in a storm force 13. And we have waves breaking over the bow and over the bridge. So a sudden wall of water over the whole front of the ship and hitting the bridge. Straight on.
Well, and that's where they had a rope tied from the forecastle to midships, and people would hold on to that rope to get across the deck, or else they would have been washed over the side.
Well, more than that, you tied a rope around your waist and with your piece with a loop, and you loop that over the lifeline, and then you held those 2 ends together. That was much safer. And if you got washed, the water carry on, at least you had that to hang on to, because if you were hanging onto the main line itself, you could get washed away.
Right.
But I know one person got the water hit, and he took his boot off him.
Wow.
Sucked his boot off.
Yeah. The force of water is pretty powerful.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, Neville, were you ever afraid? For me, I would have been very afraid with waves coming over like that. Was that ever, a feeling that you or the other crew would have?
Well, we did. We never told it. We never mentioned it. It was like,
yeah,
he kept it. It was internal.
Yeah.
You'd be quietly bricking it.
Well, the fact you survived, it must have been the wildest carnival ride you ever went on, right?
It was memorable. You wouldn't have forgotten it.
That's right.
Like a cork bobbing in the water.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
Janis, I've got some other photographs here. Do you want me
to
show?
let's do that. So finally, after it was decided we were done with our Liability cruise, we went into dry dock and got all the barnacles scraped off the bottom, and we had the propeller was fixed because it had gotten bashed up from hitting the rocks. So this was just a picture of the ship in the dry dock. And while it was in dry dock, us kids who were on the ship were put in a hotel called Hotel Valencia. You can go to the next picture. So here, this is all the kids that were on the ship at the time during the Liability cruise. And in the middle there is Ira Shaloff. He was
Hang on.
married to
I'm trying
what,
to get
Neville?
my picture back. Trying to get
Oh,
my
okay.
picture back here.
Yeah. Ira was newly married to our tutor, Candy Swanson, Candy Shaloff. And she took this picture of Ira with us. And you can go to the next picture, you can see us better. This is the girls. That's Suzette on the left, Suzette Hubbard. And that's me in that very highly patented dress. And then
I'm trying to get the picture back, actually. Hang on.
Just move your mouse.
I'm doing it, yes.
You got it?
Not yet, no.
Click
We can
the
see
mouse.
you.
Yeah, we can see you.
We can see you and hear you. So that
Okay, that's fine.
Have you tried clicking the mouse?
Yeah, hang on. Yes, I'm just trying to get back into it here. I'm on the mouse here, just trying to get myself back into it, you see. But carry on talking. I can talk to you anyway.
In the middle with the necklace on, that is Claire Popham, who we called Poppy. And then next to her is Polly Lacey. She was Joan Robertson's niece. And then my sister Terry on the right.
Okay, good.
And the photo bomber?
The photo bomber, I don't know who that is.
Well, before selfies.
Can you share it again? Can you share it to me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's still up there, Nev.
I'm just not getting you that.
You don't have the photographs?
I just got me at the moment. Hang on, let me just log.
How about this? I'll take this out and then I'll put you back in.
Can you see it now?
Not yet. Hang on.
Because we can see you.
Okay, hang on. Let me re-enter the site.
Hopefully we don't lose you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's just carry on anyway.
Yeah, we're almost done. We only got one more slide left. All right, Janis, and then what's the next one?
So those are the girls. We were all around the same age. I just turned 12 while we were in dry dock or about to turn 12.
I can tell you about the dry docking. I had to steer the ship into Valencia Harbour, up the river, and into the dry dock, which as a crew we did quite well because we did it without any assistance from tugboats. We got it. We lined up across the stays, and then we just let the lines took over. I got transferred to a small pension place where we stayed, and I had to share a room with Bill Robertson, where we got together to start the preparations for the advanced organisation in Edinburgh. I should tell you an interesting story, actually. Before we left Alicante, we had that night before we left, some students there, a lot of young singers, Californians, had been on OT3, on a retread of OT3, and they had like an a cappella group on the foyer singing a song about, and we'll kiss the ground when we do OT3 the second time around, right? And they were singing this, and it was like a little group, and there's about 12 of them there, and they were doing it in front of the lift, right in the hall there. And as they came to the crescendo at the very end, the lift doors opened, and out stepped LRH with an entourage. You've never seen fear in anyone's face like those people there,
You there?
Yeah.
I'm here, yes.
Yeah.
That was absolutely, and it was from that point then that we then got put onto the Liability cruise. We were sent up to it, but that was the precursor to it. We were gathered together and sent up.
Let me ask you. Go ahead.
It was the Residencia Raycar we were at, a bigger apartment block in Alicante. And we were gathered together and sent up for the Liability cruise.
How did you all get out of liability eventually, Janis? What happened? Like, were there certain things you had to do before you got upgraded, or how did that work?
Yeah, well, we had to do the training. We had to do the staff status 1 and 2 and SEAL staff status. And Neville, didn't we also have to do the able-bodied seaman check sheet?
I'm not sure. I know we had to do the security checks and everyone.
Yeah, everyone had to get the Joburg security check.
Yeah.
How long how long was the liability cruise period? How months, weeks?
No, about 2 months, about six to 8 weeks, Neville.
About that, yes.
Yeah.
And then all during that time, Hubbard was where?
On the Avon River.
He was on the Avon, and then he went to Marseille and stayed in a villa in Marseille. But during that time period, I remember Candy, as our tutor, she saw us kids, we were stuck on the ship. Everyone's in liability. So she asked Mary Sue's permission to take us ashore. So she took us ashore, took us to the beach, let us go swimming. And you're talking, it's March. That was cold water. And when we came back, Suzette and I went to Mary Sue shaking, "Can we go take a hot bath?" And because no one was allowed to shower, And so Mary Sue was like, "Oh, yes," and let us go off and take a hot bath.
Well, hygiene on the liability cruise was at a minimal, We had to preserve water.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was
And do you remember, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was basically like just get washed to the sink.
And then do you remember being upgraded, or how did that happen? Janis, what happened at the end?
I just remember us being told we're no longer in liability, and then we sailed into Marseille, and that's when Hubbard ended up coming aboard. And the interesting thing about us showing up in Marseille, when Hubbard showed up there on the Avon River, the port captain's office never had him pass through immigration and get his passport stamped so that he was legally in France. So he was actually illegally in France. And then when he's trying to return now to the Scotman, it was a big PR flap, public relations flap, because he was in the country illegally. And my mom ends up having to fire on a mission to calm everyone down and get his passport stamped and get him through immigration, able to leave the country. But it was a big flap. Do you remember that, Neville?
I wasn't there at the time.
Oh, okay.
Let me ask you a question then, Janis.
By that time, I was up to Edinburgh.
Oh, okay. Yes.
No, Janis, so then you bring up a good question. So when you guys would go into a different country's port, how would your passports get handled? I mean, would somebody come on board and stamp everybody's passport, or how did that work?
Yes. The port captain's office kept everybody's passports. They're all kept in a box. And then either someone would come aboard, or they would then take it to immigration and get every passport stamped. And then later on, a lot of crew got seaman cards, so you didn't have to have a passport, and you just showed your seaman card. But that's where the Sea Org tradition came about of turning in your passport, because when you go to the different ports, they needed all the passports. And so the port captain's office just kept all the passports right there on file. And when it was time for you to leave the ship, you got your passport from them, because you were now going to travel as an individual, where as a ship, it was all in a box, all in one place.
Which made it convenient in future times with the free winds. If somebody wanted to leave the ship or blow, they couldn't, because their passport was locked up in the port captain's office.
Exactly. But I believe they also did that at Gold and at Int, where they started taking people's passports, and that was more of to keep them there rather than allow them to have their passports. They didn't need to have the passports locked up once we all moved ashore.
Right. Yeah, they never did that with us. I mean, when we were there, you know what I mean, in at the
No,
base. No, I always
I
had my
had
passport.
mine, but I have heard of a bunch of Europeans who couldn't get their
Yeah,
passports.
yeah. Okay. And then when Hubbard came back on after the Liability cruise, was everything hunky dory and happy times? I mean, what was he happy with what happened?
Well, he was happy with the progress, and yeah, he was happy to come on to the Scotman, and that day that he came aboard is the day that I went on watches, with Quentin having stood the first 3 hours as a Commodore's messenger, and then I did as a Commodore's messenger, and that was the start of the messengers. Because
Okay.
now he just moved from a small ship or from a villa now onto a big ship, and it saved him a lot of time of tracking people down, because we did not have a system of being able to phone anywhere. We ended up putting in an intercom system into 12 different locations around the ship, but you couldn't just get on go to the bridge and go to the PA and tell someone to come to the Commodore's office. That's where the messengers came in use.
Okay. I got one more photo here, Janis.
Yep.
Who's this here?
This here is Sylvia Calhoun, and I wanted to acknowledge her as the photographer of those Liability cruise photographs when we were stuck ashore in Spain with no money and passports and so forth. Sylvia was on my boat and took all those wonderful photographs.
Yeah, they're very high quality. I mean, the quality of the photographs were great.
Before she came to the Sea Oaks, she had just graduated from a photographic university.
Right. And then she's also famous for taking the photograph of your first book, right? Of you on the Walking with L. Ron Hubbard.
That's right. She also took that picture on my first book.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
This one here, right? Let me add it right here.
Yes. Yes, she took that picture.
That's great. Yep. Okay. Thanks very much, Sylvia. We appreciate that. Okay. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about the Liability cruise before we end off?
I think we've got it covered. What do you think, Nev?
I think for the purposes of this, we've covered the basic bones of it. You know, it's we could go into minutiae, but I mean, it's irrelevant. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's lots more adventures and stories afterwards, but that pretty much covers the Liability cruise.
And a lot of former Sea Org members from that time would remember that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else you want to say, Neville, before we end off?
What's the next topic?
Don't know.
Let's figure that out. We'll get off the air and then we'll figure that out for the next topic.
Okay, then.
Neville, don't hang up. I'm going to take you out and we'll play the video and we'll talk to you on the other side, okay?
Okay, good.
All right. Until next time, all of our viewers, thanks very much for watching. We'll see you again next time. Take care.
Please excuse the dogs.